So that means we will be going to our next game next time. So anyway, that's the end of the playthrough. So let's go ahead and do a review, which is very soon, so soon after a review of like the previous game, Lunar Eternal Blue Complete. So I'll have to figure out something to do on Friday if we do something on Friday. Anyway, so now that this is going to be our review section. We're gonna go ahead and review the game, and then we'll go from there. So usually I divide the review into 4 aspects. So story, graphics, visuals, sound, and of course, most importantly, of course, gameplay. And yeah, so I guess we'll get started. So I guess, as you probably all might have guessed, it's that the story is definitely the biggest part of this game. So this game was definitely made with it's a sort of like historical fiction, because obviously, I mean, I think the family is based on a real one. I'm not entirely sure, because those photos that you see are actually real photos, so, and they look like they came from the 70s, like before this game, the timeline of this game. So that's definitely the highlight of the game. I mean, this was meant to tell a story about a period of time that isn't very, or like a setting and period which is not well known to people in the West or the East, for that matter. I mean, like, this is a very much a Middle East, like, we're not told much about the actual history of the Middle East, which is very fascinating, by the way, if you ever research into it. So this takes place in before the 1979 revolution, which is where the Shah was. Well, the revolution in this game that takes place in this game is the one that topples Shah Mohammad Reza of the Pahlavi dynasty, the last dynasty of Persia, for Iran, and now it is the before it became the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is the current regime. And so the story is kind of set in this. You have a bunch of choices. It does change the dialogue, but it looks like there's only really some key points that will change things. And at least the game is kind enough to tell you which parts will actually change something. Although it gives you that red herring of like, ha, the traitor is such and such. Well, you will know. Well, no, that traitor that's a complete, like, farce. As we figured out in the game, or like at least from game packs. So, like, I do like the fact that the story is pulling from a period of time that not a lot of people know about, and one nice thing is that it seems like, as far as I can tell, it represents the historical event really well. So the characters are representations of, like, all the different factions and different ways of thinking at the time. Some believed in a more violent, or like a stronger resistance. Others believed in like a more a more peaceful one, like Babak was peaceful, and then Ali was more of the violent side of the revolution. And then of course each of the characters, like, there's the communists, the traditional, like, the Islamic side, the religious side, and it was really, and some of the people were more for democracy, for more like the Western model. So it's really interesting to have a character for each of, like, the different factions, so that way you kind of got an idea of, like, who was all involved, just how involved this revolution was. So if you're, like, interested in history, this is really good. And it's also, like, I think they represented, like, the sad parts, like the really terrible parts of what happened in the revolution, like the violent, like the royal guard. I know it's not even a simple matter of like lawful, neutral, chaotic. It's just like you never felt like anyone was just totally, like, wrong, like whether or not it was like, we can talk with the Shah, or some of the royalists who are like, no, we should, like, just talk to the Shah, and like he needs to, like, if the Shah will just like cater to us, then maybe it'll be like. But yeah, it's just really interesting. And I think most point is like when they're like, even the family themselves, like Reza's family is kind of divided on how they feel about the whole thing, and because it affects everyone in Iran. And you got that real sense. And like you saw the interrogators apparently are really, that's really what happens, like these forced confessions where they were just like being tortured. They were tortured and they were just and like it just was a good representation of like what had happened, the kind of torture that happened. And like it's unpleasant to watch for sure. And like 100%, I'm not saying that this is awesome, but like it's just a show like really like the bouts of human cruelty. And like just, it's not a pleasant thing to do, but it's just like it does make you think about like why, like just how hard it was, and just like how dire the situation was. And even like in the situations, it's so tense, so we're on the edge of our seats half the time, and you have to watch some pretty really sad things actually, and really sad that like things turned out like so violent back then, and like people just want to live their life. They just wanted something better, and then like, and then violence was shown and force was used against them, and like against innocent people too. And it's just very sobering, and like we have it very not like it is a night like, okay, I'm gonna wax a little bit more philosophical here, but like I mean, like I'm not saying that we don't have it bad in some ways in here in our where we live, like for us who live in the first world, I guess is what we call it, like in like the North America, like Canada, US, or like people who are living in Europe. Like we definitely don't have it all great either, but like we definitely have it better these days, and we definitely can go further, but without like delving into details. But it's always good to remember what had happened before and how much worse you could have it, for sure. Very sobering. So I think that's great about like how the story was like showing that kind of side of like real events that happened, real things that like that went through, and perhaps like a little bit of a light of like why things in Iran are the way they are now, why there's the Islamic Republic of Iran instead of like a kingdom, empire of Persian Empire like it used to be. So I think they really did a good job of like showing like the history, and of course this is only one person's like view of it, really, like or our team's view of it, and of course other people will like may disagree of how it was represented, but I mean we don't really know because I wasn't born in the 70s and I didn't live in Iran at the 70s, so I don't know what happened, but for myself. But it is good to get that this is being shed light of like someone's perception of the revolution, and that the writer himself was actually a child during this time, so he had actually gone through this stuff. It was, oh my gosh, it's so scary. So some of it was writing from his own personal experiences, and there are definitely people that don't agree. I mean, this game was banned in Iran because some people in Iran feel that it's like propaganda, so it's always good to take everything with a grain of salt, like, and definitely check up on things. But anyway, that's off the topic, but I like the fact that the story is shedding light on stuff that had happened before, and you also got an understanding of Persian culture, and it's a fascinating culture that stems from ancient times, so definitely something you should try to check out if you get a chance. So overall, I really did enjoy it, and I felt like it was very like I felt it was a pretty good representation of the human side of everything that happened, because it's not just an event, it's like people's lives were really affected. Okay, so now that story's done, I can go to graphics really quickly. So I'll be honest, for a 2016 game, this game's graphics are I don't know, they're not really great. I mean, granted, I'm on the, like, this is the Switch version, so it is a little worse than the PC, but from what I've seen on the PC side, it's not that great either, from what I've seen. So it's a little bit lacking even on the PC version, from what I've saw. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. They actually put a lot of effort, so the motion capture is a real thing. They wanted to show real movement, so you can tell the interrogator is completely mocapped and like it's all acted out. Very it creates this really intimidating effect when you see, or you see like the things happen in the out in the field section. So the graphics they're not as good as they could be. Like it's definitely a bit like it's definitely indie for sure, and like I think sometimes the graphics kind of made things look a little like, you will see all these like, it kind of clashes with like the real life photographs and everything that you see in the game, and it doesn't look wonderful. I'm kind of overlooking it because the story is so fascinating, but I do think that it definitely needed some improvement, and it definitely could have been better for 2016. Like I definitely was expecting more of it, and it's probably related to budget, but I have to grade it even against other indies which look better. So it's kind of unfortunate that they probably, like, I have to be honest and say like for a modern game it's not great. So that's kind of a detriment to the game, unfortunately. Like, do I think that it makes the game unplayable? No, but it's definitely like, it's kind of almost immersion breaking, where it's kind of like, it looks a little jank. And it's not a good, that just kind of takes you out of like the whole, the feel they were going for. So like the main character models are definitely better than the NPCs, which look really like jank. And like, and like the locales need a little more, like it just doesn't look real enough for what the kind of setting they're going for, because we're definitely not going for like a very cartoony style. So it just really kind of throws you off. It definitely could have been better, and I think that's unfortunately one of the shortcomings. Other than that, and sometimes it was a little bit tough to tell, because the way things are set up is like, it's kind of hard to tell where you're supposed to walk through. I guess the game is so linear that even you really can't get lost, but sometimes you just run into, you have these, it has this invisible wall effect that's very odd, and it looks kind of weird too. And you think they would like have dialogue, it's like, hey, I should probably like, let me talk to Babak, or in some cases, or like, let's progress the plot. I want to go talk to, like, even something to acknowledge that, like, oh, I'm going too far, maybe I need to talk to somebody, would have been nice. So yeah, invisible walls, it's just like contributes to the game feeling a little bit like low budget. Probably because it was. So that's why, yeah, that's it. I have to be honest, it's just not great. Anyway, anything else I want to say about the graphics side? The text seems to be big enough. Granted, I'm playing on the TV screen, so maybe it's okay. Like, I think the text is big enough, and at least the icons are very obvious, so I'll give them that. Like, if I need to know if I can interact with something, there's the very obvious icons, and that's always good. Like, the camera icon is very obvious, and you definitely have a cue to see it, so if you need to take a picture, you can certainly do so. Anything else I want to say about it? And like, the UI is very like minimal, as you can see here, but it gets the job done. It's not overly fancy. Reminds me a lot of other adventure games as well, like of this style. So minimal, and like, because they want to show more of the visuals, and of course like the actual art around the game is actually really nice too. It's just unfortunate that 3D models don't represent it very well, so it's kind of unfortunate. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it for graphics. Let's go ahead and go to sound, which I think the game kind of excels in. So as you can see, you can hear the chanting, and like, there's a lot of sound in this game. There's a lot of like speeches and tidbits from the revolution itself, the actual historical event, which is, I think, provides that nice backdrop to this event being a real thing. And like, they have a lot of chanting chants as well, so you can like hear what is being, kind of feel like you really are in the place where this event is happening. So the sound design is very good. The voice acting is I feel like the voice acting is actually pretty good. Like there are some scenes that were like, ooh, they had to put like the right amount of emotion, and like it's never like, I think it's not overacted, and like I like that it's sort of like it sounds like a real person talking, and like the addition of like all the Farsi, which is like, so yeah, Farsi is the language of Iran. It's Persian, by the way. Farsi is just what it's officially called. Like all the random Persian inside to like kind of give, like, even though they wanted to still have do their lines in English so you could like understand what's going on, I like that they also sometimes repeat the same lines in Farsi, and so you can hear how they would have actually sounded like. I really appreciate that too. So you're not completely like removed from the cultural context, even if you're not a native Farsi, fluent Farsi speaker. I'm not, so I could not tell you if they're pronouncing it correctly. But I like that it kind of keeps it so like, no, this is still Iran. It's not a English-speaking country, and like, so you actually got to hear. Yeah, I love how they speak both languages. I agree. So like, cause like Farsi is a beautiful language. Like this is a side, and like when you hear people, and like it's one of the most beautiful languages in the world, in my opinion. And you get to hear it, and you get to hear what the people sounded like. And they even have like Farsi versions of like some of the speeches you hear, and it's really cool that you can get access to it. And the characters themselves speak Farsi to each other, in addition to the English lines. I'm actually thinking like who the voice actors they picked. They must have been fluent in both languages. And I think like that actually, like they did a great job. Like the voice actors did great. I have nothing but like praise for it. I didn't notice anything that was really off, really bad. And I have to give props to the interrogator, like Hodge. Hodge. It's just like, wow. So like I felt it was an interrogation the whole time. Like if you didn't know what's going on, you were just like that really contributed to like adding that feel, like that emotion. And like you actually felt like everyone was like, it felt like you're hearing natural speech. So it's just like, oh man, I really makes me want to increase my my voice acting skills as well, because I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I could perform this well. And like it's not overacted, which is very good too. And it's not underacted. We had a problem with that in the previous game, which I will bring up because you should play that game for yourself. So I thought it was great. Good props to them, and like the music is very fitting too. Like, of just to add the gravitas of the situation, to put it more formally. And yeah, I mean, great job. Like the sound really does make this game. Honestly, the story and the sound together, and you really it makes you feel for each of the characters as well. Like it's like a terrible, desperate situation. You felt like the passion that people had for the country as well, and that's really kind of like what the revolution was about. People wanting a better place, a better country, a better nation. So you felt that from the performances. So great job. Alright, so this finally makes us come to like gameplay and controls, and this is gonna be short because there really isn't much gameplay, so to speak. Like the only times you actually could die is probably like either you pick a bad dialogue choice or you mess up a quick time event. And there's only one quick time event that might give you trouble, which is the one where you're dodging bullets, and that one was kind of like, yeah, basically I'm kind of reiterating what the Game Press already said about it, but yeah, the quick time events are a little like kind of weird, and like the arrows aren't really shown very well, so sometimes you're like, there was an arrow there, oops, I didn't see it, the white blended in with the rest of the game. That could have been made more clear, and like And it's kind of annoying when you die in the quick time event and you have to start it all over again, so you cannot skip dialogue. So that is one thing that is kind of annoying. But like, I understand why you can't skip dialogue, because they want to make it so that you have to pick the choices, so you cannot skip the dialogue. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I wish there was a way to like just jump from dialogue choice to dialogue choice, which I would prefer. And yes, that's another thing I don't like, is that I understand that like they wanted to make it so that you couldn't dwell on your choices for long. But one thing that's less, it's just like you're able to replay this chapter over and over again. So if you really cared, like, why make the chapters replayable? I guess they want to punish you for like not making the choice that you best choice at the time. You have to do it all over again. But at the same time, it just seems like wasteful. It's just an annoyance to the player, because like honestly, like it also, like, this game also assumes that you can read relatively fast, and I kind of wish they did not do that, because like even for an accessibility reason, like sometimes people can't read, like if English is, for instance, not your native language, or like you're not a fast reader, then you're just like kind of boned, and you're gonna get stuck with a default that you didn't want, that you might have wanted a different choice. I feel like the timers could have been way more generous, for sure. And like, I didn't like the fact that like, one, you don't know how soon you'll get. So one thing that like other games of this type where you have dialogue choices, they usually put a timer to show you how much time you have left, so you have an idea of like, oh, it's going, it's ticking down. Because like oftentimes in this game, one thing that happened was like, I don't know if it actually will take that long, or like I don't know if it's gonna wait for me, or if it's actually just one of those like you have all the time in the world to pick. And so if you didn't, you're expecting like every choice you're like, oh shoot, I gotta go because I have no idea whether this is a time dialogue, and so you're like, oh, I'll just pick something, and then you just pick something you didn't want, and then you just get in trouble. Granted, in this game it doesn't matter. A lot of the choices don't have huge consequences, but it would have been nice to give the player a little bit of a breather. I understand they're trying to give you like, oh, this is a really tense situation, you don't have time to think. But like, this is a game. Yeah, you barely have time to... That's true. And also there is another thing, like the character's still talking, you have to wait for them to finish talking, and you barely have time to make a choice. Because you're like listening to them and you're like, oh, do I have time? And then you're like, oh. Especially interrogation, like that was interrogator section, that's tough because there's so many choices in the interrogator sections that you're like, I would have liked to have more time to think about this. Although in the end, it probably a lot of times it is kind of meaningless because so I guess that's the only nice thing. But I guess you don't want to have the player rely on the fact that the dialogue choices are mostly meaningless. Like, they don't know that. I didn't know that when I was first playing, so it's just kind of lame that... It's kind of lame because, like, you're so tense and you're just like, oh no, I have to make the choices I want to make and I can't. And so it's just like, it became really, really tough. It really became really annoying to deal with, honestly. And I think, like, if they had slowed it down or they had visible dialogue timers, that would have helped a lot. Like, kind of like some Japanese games do. Yeah, that's a thing. Like, there's a couple of like Japanese games that have similar dialogue trees that do that. And the other thing that I mentioned is like, there is one thing, like in another adventure game I played, there was actually literal dialogue trees. So there was a section in the game, like for instance, this game doesn't have it, but if you go in that game, it'll actually show you the different trees of like scenes that you could have gone to. So it's very granular. And you could go to like, I wanted to change this decision and see what the outcome would have been. So it would have been really kind of nice. I mean, this game's not complicated enough to do it because there's no reason to. Most of the events just happen regardless, so you can't really change. There's only a couple of actual choice sections that actually matter greatly. Like, they're like, people remember things, but like, what difference does it make? It doesn't seem to have made a difference. Like, Yasi remembers that I allow her to take pictures, but okay. even so, like, it didn't change anything. So it's just kind of like, I feel like the game's like sort of like, it almost feels a little incomplete. I don't know, like, even this cliffhanger ending is like, I don't know what's gonna happen next, and I guess that's all I will get. And so you're kind of, I don't know, it doesn't feel very satisfying, and it feels like all like you're keeping your relationships good with people doesn't really seem to have changed much. And so like it doesn't feel like I've done much of consequence, and like this essentially the story is quite linear and nothing really changed. I guess, I mean, I don't know if I had been violent, if I had chosen for violence, whether that would have changed a lot of things. And like, probably it would have changed how people perceived me, but I think the ending would ultimately be the same. So it's kind of like, is it meaningful? Maybe not. I guess it would kill you, the consequences of being a violent person, but like, then again, you just, you don't get, your ending doesn't really change that much. Is there a sequel to this or no? There is no sequel to this. As far as I know, they are not going to make any more. So, I think you end with a cliffhanger. But yeah, it would have been nice to have like a dialogue tree section so you could get to certain choices a lot quicker. Rather than doing what I did, I had to sit through all the dialogue over and over again. Instead of getting to like the choice I actually wanted to make. So that is kind of unfortunate. So it just kind of makes replayability, it kind of weakens replayability, and you're not having, it's not as fun to deal with. And I feel like this game really could have used just a lot of quality of life. No fun for a sequel, or you're saying that like, is that from what they said, or it just said, or that's you're just speculating, which would also be not unreasonable. Like, is it just like they said there's not enough money in it, and like that's unfortunate because really it really does could have used a bit more, but it just feels like it's a little incomplete, and it's unfortunate. Yeah, so they actually did an AMA about it, so oh yeah, you're asking me a personal question. No, I'm just joking. But you asked me a question about, I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked because I was curious if like there was a sequel necessary. But anyway, did I decide to play the game because I went to the country? Yeah, partially. Like, I had been talking to... Okay, without, like, I'm not gonna go into the actual politics that surround Iran right now or back then, which was about... actually, when I went, it was about 2 years after the game came out, so... I went last year in the fall. So... Yeah, we had been talking. I had talked to some people about like this time period in Iran. Of course, like we had to know because we were definitely looking into the history of the country, especially going through all the museums and everything. So I picked this game because, yeah, actually it was recommended to me by somebody because I had been talking about an Iran trip, and they were like, "Hey, you should play this game. It's related to, you probably would really enjoy it because you already went to the country." I was like, "Oh shoot, okay." And so I scheduled to play this game, and I did, and here we are. So a lot of it is, yeah, my own personal interest in the country, and also from a recommendation as well. So let's see. Based on this, like, yeah, just some quality of life stuff would have helped a lot, and it is kind of, yeah, it just feels like the game needs a bit more into it, but anyway, I guess overall, kicking all of that into account, would I play this game? I mean, Granted, I can't even say thumbs up rent because honestly, the game is so short. If you could rent it, you could beat it in a rental. But like the game is so short, and so why not? It's not a difficult game, and you might learn something. And if you're gonna overlook the it's not difficult to play through it because, like, I guess not from a difficulty standpoint. Like, only reason you might have a difficulty is like if you cannot handle the subject matter, considering this is very it's really intense, honestly. Like, it's very sobering too. So if you're playing a game and you want to be happy, this is not the game for you, because this is about a historical event that has a lot of both good and bad that came out of it, and it's an unstable time in the country, and it's not happy at all. So not really all that happy because of what things were going on. But I definitely would recommend playing it if you are not a child, if you're not a kid, and if you can handle difficult subject matter and are interested in history of a place that you may never have been to or you may not know about, then I would definitely say you should definitely give this a play, because you will learn stuff. And I think this is great to show that video games can be used for education, and not just like teaching you math and teaching you how to spell, but like teaching you about places and cultures. I mean, we've already learned it in a way from playing various games on the stream. We've already learned quite a bit about not just, we've learned a lot about China in the past and Japan, but it is nice we've learned a bit more about, in this case we learned about Iran, which is not a country usually represented in games. And so it's very exciting to see all these other countries, these places outside of just the United States and Japan, showing games in their setting. And we learned actually a lot about Central Africa as well, if you think about it, because when we played Arian, Legacy of the Coriodan, that was a great game. That was a great story too. And so these exciting places are there for you to see if you can't travel, because travel's expensive, and you can learn about them from video games. And so yeah, I say you don't even have to be an RPG gamer. You don't have to be you don't even have to be a gamer. The game is not that hard. The only hard parts are the quick time events, and that kind of sucks. I think that's a little bit of a barrier, but it's not so difficult to get through. So overall, I would still recommend it in spite of its flaws. And I just will caution that really there isn't that much to it. The game is a bit content light, and hopefully maybe someday there will be more, but we all know. And it's unfortunate the ending kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but still worth playing and still worth learning about other places. So yeah, that's pretty much sums up my review of the game. Dang. Yeah, that's pretty much it.